Cool.
It's all good.
Okay, we are live again. I love your story. Thank you, Joseph, for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yes, sir. So let's begin our journey into your work, into your world by asking you this. I know we're all getting fatigued by talking about COVID, but it was such a pivotal moment for us to all, survive the pandemic. How did you ultimately get through that time period, and how has it changed the way that you approach things now?
It's interesting. COVID was pivotal for the entire country, obviously, as you just stated. And when it came to my life personally, it helped me focus on the things that were more important. As an anesthesiologist, I knew that I was going to be responsible to intubate the sickest people in the hospital, those with COVID. And despite using the very best personal protective equipment, there was a chance I could contract COVID. And in the beginning, we didn't know how serious or severe this was really going to be. And I have I had two 4-year old daughters. And I thought to myself, if I died this year as a result of COVID, will I be happy how I've spent the last 4 years of my life? And the answer was a resounding no. So it caused me to pause and reflect.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade schoolers, third graders. It's career day. One of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I do everything I can to save and help people. I start out um, I started out by practicing anesthesia, which of course means keeping people safe and comfortable during surgical procedures. And I kind of grew bored with that. It's not that it's boring, it's that I felt that there was more I could do with my knowledge and my skill set. And that's when I started exploring ways that I could help those who have suffered respiratory arrest, meaning they're not breathing anymore as a result of drug overdoses or really anything else. When people's hearts stop beating, what we call cardiac arrest, or if people drowned, they stop breathing. And with my unique skill set and knowledge set and the way my brain works, maybe a little bit differently than others, I was able to come up with a way to help create a medication that would help people breathe in all these scenarios, thereby impacting a much larger group of people and community.
So I got to tell you, got a quick confession to make. I'm 52, and I, for the first time, I had anesthesia for a colonoscopy. And when I got wheeled in the room, they had Pearl Jam's Jeremy playing, and I was like, I had no idea that this was going to be my entrance into a land of milk and honey.
That's funny.
It was so weird. And I remember when I came out, I kind of came to and I looked around and I said, "Is it okay for me to wake up now?" And that
That's
was it.
cute.
I popped out, it was all good. But anyways, it's such a weird feeling. And it took a while to get there. So let me ask you this. When you were in the third grade, when you were young, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
So, as a third grader, I just knew I loved science. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to create, and I just loved learning how things worked. And that's really all I knew. I wasn't super good in English class. I mean, I did fine with spelling, but I kind of got okay marks on language arts. Um, but that, I mean, I considered being an astronaut and being a pilot. And then finally, it was actually when I was in fifth grade that I did a project on the heart that led me into medicine. I thought, this is it. This is the coolest organ in the body. There's so much I can do here. It was very intuitive for me. What required a lot of study and thought for a lot of people was just facile to me. I could just think about it. Comparatively, where electricians see and understand electricity, I don't touch wires because I get shocked most of the time. So, it was kind of a good direction for me to pointed me towards medicine.
So take me back to where you were born and raised. How did these seeds of scientific and medicinal fascination take root and grow into who you are today, into the career that you have?
That's a fantastic question, Joe. So I'm going to interpret your question as to the influences that got me to where I am. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so my dad was always good at prompting me to think about my future and what I was interested in. I remember him asking me from as young as 3 years of age, what are you going to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? And I remember going through all sorts of things. I want to be a truck driver. I want to be a garbage man. I want to play piano. And, slowly those nebulas of ideas began coalescing into stars of concentrated interests. And as I explored um, the different opportunities that were available to me, I started asking people, even as a young kid, what do you like about this? What do you like about that? In fact, we had a family friend who was an airline pilot. And I said, what do you like about being an airline pilot? And he told me about it. I said, what don't you like about it? And I was a little kid, but I was taking it all in. And I thought about that and got exposed to people of different careers. We talk about various privileges that people may or may not have. I was privileged to be exposed to a wide array of careers and professions, at least what seemed wide at the time. Of course, there's a lot of things I wasn't exposed to that might have led me in a different direction. But we moved around a lot growing up. I was exposed to a lot of different folks, but what the constant my entire life was really an interest in science. And I'll end on one more point on this. I had one of my younger daughters, who's now 8, is remarkably like me in that she just has a love and a passion for science that I didn't give her. It's innate. So seeing her grow up um, leads me to believe that a lot of my interests really are innate. I was born with it, and it was just these series of experiences that helped me see it.
It's interesting how when you do become a parent, you start thinking about that nature nurture, the apple not falling too far. Because I see that with my son. I'm like, how did he get? So when I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do was to write baseball players and I would get autographs. So in the arduous days of having to write everything out, I would write self-addressed stamped envelopes. I'd mail it to Oral Hershiser or whoever I was into at the time, and I would get an autograph back. I would look at that mailbox. And my son, without me even doing that to him, loves meeting athletes, loves the autograph. You know what I'm saying? Like there was
Yeah,
nothing, and I've told people there was nothing about this because I was fascinated with sports and all of that. And he has completely got into that because I didn't sit him down and show him any of this. He never saw any of the autographs, any of the stuff. It happened.
it's so cool. And we've seen this in cases of identical twins who were separated at birth, and both twins end up going into very similar fields. Like maybe one's an ultrasound tech and one's a nurse, but they're both in healthcare. It's very interesting, and I like you said, it causes us to reflect on the qualities and the values of nature versus nurture.
Yeah, for sure. So you've talked about influences, but ultimately in your life, who's been a hero or an inspiration for you?
I think most directly, it's been my grandfather who passed about close to 10 years ago. He was the only other physician in our family. He was a general practice doc, graduated from medical school in 47, used to deliver babies, and this is his words, not mine, obviously. We used to deliver babies in cabins with dirt floors, extremely impoverished areas in eastern Kentucky. He dabbled in surgery, which is crazy to think about anybody dabbling in anything like that. But it was a different time, and it was really cool to see him apply science and the humanity that goes along with medicine and then combine the two. He was very well respected in his community. He was a beloved father figure to his 9 children, and a fantastic man and mentor to me. So I think seeing him and seeing how he lived was inspirational. But honestly, I think what caused me to kind of refocus my life, especially during COVID, was honestly it was a finding of Christ and a value of Christ in my life.
There was I interviewed an author that had a friend who was like oh, he lived to be like 104, 105. It was crazy.
Wow.
And he was in medicine. And in the book they talked about how they would take a piano wire on a tonsil and all of the archaic things. It's so wild to think how surgery and medicine was back in the day and how unbelievably advanced we are now in administering those things. Isn't it wild?
It is totally wild. And I can give you a few examples, things that I only heard from my grandfather. I haven't heard anywhere else. Um, so he started practicing medicine before the invention of penicillin. So they used to cure infections with injections. It was an injection in the gluteus, in the backside, a combination of arsenic and mercury. If you can imagine treating people with heavy metal poisoning was how they killed infections. So he's like, yeah, it didn't work great, but it was the best we had. But it also, if you want to look at it from a continuum standpoint, we're going to look back on where we are in medicine today and think about some of the archaic and crazy things that we do to heal people, or to treat people. And I think that's also kind of interesting. What are we doing right now in medicine that people are just going to shake their head at and think, what are they thinking? I mean, if you look back to I think it was in the 50s when they used to do frontal lobotomies. That's insane. And that guy won a Nobel Prize
Yeah.
for that. It's wild to think, that was, 50s was what, 80 years ago, 75 years ago. Um, what are we doing today that we're going to look at 50, 60, 70 years from now and think, what were those people thinking?
So in August, my wife had a hysterectomy, a partial. I mean, it was rather intense, but
Yeah,
it wasn't full. And I was talking to a guy that his wife got one in the 80s and she was out for like 6 months. Like it was hardcore. She had minimally invasive, very small scars, was back at it within 2 or 3 weeks, and was fully okay after 2 months, right?
it's
So
awesome.
just
Yeah,
with that right there, it's wild.
it
To-
really is. It really is. To think about how we've evolved healthcare into being more palatable. The the idea that you would be out for months, 6 months from a hysterectomy, which is a very common procedure, that's life upending. Most people have a really hard time giving up 6 months of their life. I mean, there's work. There's, if you're a younger woman who has children at home, you've got children that are relying on you. You've got, other responsibilities. And to think that now, I mean, literally, we do hysterectomies and people go home the next day. It's a wild evolution and really a very substantial progress between the minimally invasive surgeries and just the ability to heal more quickly.
So if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, whether in your field or otherwise, and spend a little time with them, who would that be?
Elon Musk, hands down.
Yeah,
And this is not a political statement.
sure.
The thing I like about Elon is that he is such a visionary. Like him or don't like him, socially, politically, he's got a lot of weird quirks. But the fact that he was the first one to come up with the idea of paying people electronically, he was the first. I think it was called X initially or X Pay or something like that
Yeah,
before it became PayPal.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that whole concept was so bizarre. In fact, when I first heard about it, I'm like, this is nuts. I don't trust this at all. And now I do it pretty much every day.
All
No
the
big
time.
deal. I'll Venmo you. I'll cash out you. No
Yes.
big deal.
Yes.
So the fact that he did that, the fact that he made electric vehicles ubiquitous, and he was doing things that the major auto manufacturers of the world couldn't do. In fact, and he's had a lot of quality issues. I'm not a go Tesla person, but the
Yeah.
reality is he was able to mass produce electric vehicles that have a substantial range and they're relatively affordable. I mean, you can get one for whatever it is, 35K. Um, he's done amazing things. And then when you look at SpaceX, these are three extraordinarily varied fields that he was able to bring to the cutting edge. How does one person do that? His mind must just work so differently. I would love to sit down with him and say, Elon, I know you can't give me what you've got up in your head, but I would love to hear how you think so that maybe I can retrain my brain to kind of think like that. I think, some of what I've been doing with ResPen, this medication that we're using to save people that have stopped breathing, it's I've been able to do it because I'm thinking outside the box. I'm literally taking all the same ingredients that have been available to, thousands of other scientists before me, and nobody's doing what we're doing for reasons I don't fully understand. And maybe that's how Elon feels with his cars and his rockets and PayPal. Why has nobody else done this? I'm doing it on a very minute scale compared to what he's done, but I think he has a tremendous ability to see things that other people aren't seeing. And I think that would make for some really interesting conversation one on one.
The one thing that you said that I want to kind of hone in on as a physician, um, is I'm doing trainings right now and they're talking about cardiac arrest. What do you do when someone's heart stops? Have you been in that scenario where you've been around a human being where it's
All the time.
okay?
I mean,
So
that's part of what we do. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't want to assume, but what's going through your head? I mean, that's such a pivotal moment. You're in the middle of this world and the next, and there's all of these things that are coming in. I mean, you're coming from a biological standpoint, but there's this whole spiritual, philosophical, emotive, everything. What is going through your head when that happens?
It's interesting. And maybe I just that I give credit to the training, but I think very much like an airline pilot is managing a crisis in the cockpit. It's very much the same thing. You're going through a series of algorithms. Everything is pretty much calm. There's a lot of people talking, and so the anesthesiologist, the way it works is, so I'm speaking about it from an in-hospital point of view, which would be different than on the street, of course, because you're dealing with non-skilled personnel. But in the hospital, you're surrounded by skilled personnel. I can, usually the anesthesiologists, if they're the ones in the room who's there managing it, they're the ones running what we call running the code. We're kind of directing things, and there's just an algorithm. They have the ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation. So first thing you do, you secure the airway. We're doing chest compressions, and then we have a person who's in the corner of the room who's got an emergency cart. It's like a toolbox that's full of various medications, life-saving medications. And we just go down the algorithm. Let's give them the epi, chest compressions, 3 minutes. Let's give them the atropine. And we're going through this in a very systematic way. And it's not to depersonalize it, but I'm not thinking, holy crap, this person's dead. And if I don't save them, they're going to stay dead. I'm not thinking about that.
Sure.
And perhaps the most honest answer is this person's dead and I'm not going to hurt them. I mean, they're already dead. All I can do is help. And the training just kicks in, follow the algorithms, trust that they're there, honed in by the very best group of physicians who was able to put that together, and just do the work. And it's up to God if they live or die.
Yeah, there you go. Well said. So at the end of the day, what is it that gets you up out of bed to do the work that you do? What is the motivator, the ultimate, because you're helping so many people, but you have to evolve as a human being. What is that collective energy for you?
It's the focus on the knowledge that I possess a very specific skill set that only I have. And that's not to be egotistical. You have a specific skill set that only you have. Johnny over there has a specific, and so on and so forth. But I have a specific skill set that I've been given, and it's up to me to make the most of that. And if I have the ability to save lives, 300 people die every single day from drug overdose. If I had the ability to bring that number closer to zero, and I don't do it, what kind of jerk am I? It feels very selfish. So it can be very taxing, but at the same time, I try not to take the weight of that on personally. Like I tell my kids, you do your best, just do your best. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. At least you tried. You gave it your all. So I get up in the morning. I'm always thinking about the next step and how to progress and how to do things better, both from a professional and a personal side. Are you familiar with the term Kaizen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Kaizen. It's getting a little bit better each step of the way, each day. When I look back at who I was 5 years ago, I can kind of cringe a little bit. And 5 years ago, that guy would have looked back at the guy 5 years before that and cringed. So, that's a good thing. I don't want to look back 5 years, like who I was 5 years ago, and think, wow, I wish I was that guy still. Like, I don't want to do that. I always want to look back and cringe and think, wow, I've grown, I've gotten better, making my community, both locally and globally, a better place to be. I think that's what we're called on to do.
So, of all of the work that you've done with clients and patients, what's been one of the best fan letters or responses or reflective moments that someone has shared with you?
Um, I've gotten a lot of, and it's hard. I can't pick out just one,
Sure.
Joe. But what I feel resounds the most with me is when somebody tells me that I made a difference for them. Um, it's easy to forget your anesthesiologist. We're in the room, you're asleep, you wake up, you don't even see us again. Um, but every once in a while, maybe it's a person who's suffering from a significant life altering condition. We'll say cancer, just picking something out. Or maybe I'm taking care of their child, or somebody who's just extraordinarily fearful of what they're about to undergo, even if it's not dangerous from a medical standpoint, but they're still really scared. If I'm able to connect with that person, and I always try, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, you always do your best. Um, when I get feedback from somebody who said, you know what, Dr. Nounou, you really made a difference in my life. You've really helped me, and I'm thankful that God put us together that day. And I think that's as much of a compliment as I can get.
Yeah. So, of everything that you've done and achieved and overcome and uh, just the new career path and everything that you've done, what are you the proudest of?
Um, Taking a leap of faith, leaving a full time career of practicing medicine, which pays just fine. I've got a mortgage, I've got 5 kids, all of whom will have their own expenses I got to cover. Um, Taking a leap of faith and being able to say, you know what, I've got to do this. I'm not going to be afraid, and I'm just going to see it through the best I can. And I've been doing this now in earnest for about 3.5 years, basically working half time in medicine and full time in this drug development. Um, it's scary, but it's something I can look back and I can say, you know what, that's really cool. Most people wouldn't have done that. It's scary.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's a great question, Joe. I love it.
Good.
I know that I'm a person of unwaverable character. Um, I'm stronger than I think I am or than I believe I am. I've done things that I never thought I could do. Um, I can be a person who can be hard to get along with sometimes because I got some strong opinions and I can have a strong personality, and that's part of my Kaizen. I'm working on that. Um, but I've not met anybody who cares more deeply and who cares more passionately. Um, I love my family, my God, my community more than anybody else I know, and I like it that way. Um, I do wish that I didn't I wasn't quite as strong a personality as I am, but at the same time, that's who I am. Maybe I can kind of buff off those rough edges a little bit with time, and 5 years from now, I can look back and be like, yeah, he's a little bit smoother around the edges.
Yeah, I dig it. If anyone wants to reach out, learn more about you, any of the good business, where do they go?
Probably the website, rospharma.com, has a connect with us contact page. And we're always updating that website anyway. So if they go there, they can find my link tree, LinkedIn. If it's not up there yet, it will be soon. We're still working on honing some of that stuff. So I would love to hear from your fans. I'd love to have some one-on-one questions and thoughts. I'm big into helping people in the community. If there's anyone I can help get to where they want to go. I'm happy to give advice. It's one more point on that. I think it's really interesting as I've gone through this. So many people are gatekeeping the secrets and the qualities and the ideas that got them to where they are. And I think that's such a disservice to the community. I want everybody to be successful.
Yeah.
You want to compete with me? Come along. Let's duke it out. Let's see who makes it to the finish line. I invite you. I welcome it. It makes everybody stronger. It makes everything better. And you know what? If I can help you at the same time, you're going to be pushing me. So it's helping me at the same time. So let's go. Let's do it.
That's wonderful. Joseph, well said. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your
Thanks for
time.
having me, Joe.
Keep doing the great work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.